Glad you could join us today on EarthFile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. The new State of the World's Forest Report of the United Nations says the world has lost 178 million hectares of forest since 1990. The Global Forest Resources Assessment Report says most of the forest loss happens in sub-Saharan Africa and in South America, but Southeastern Asia losing about 1 million hectares of forest every year. The findings are our focus today on the program. Do stay with us. All people depend upon forests and their biodiversity, some more than others. Forests provide more than 86 million green jobs and support the livelihoods of many more people. An estimated 880 million people worldwide spend part of their time collecting firewood or producing charcoal, many of them women. Human populations tend to be low in areas of low-income countries with high forest cover and high forest biodiversity, but poverty rates in these areas tend to be high. Some 252 million people living in forests and savannas have incomes of less than $1.25 per day. According to the recently published The State of the World's Forest Report, since the 1990s, it is estimated that some 420 million hectares of forest have been lost through conversion to other land uses, although the rate of deforestation has decreased over the past 3 decades. Between 2015 and 2020, the rate of deforestation was estimated at 10 million hectares per year, down from 16 million hectares per year in the 1990s. The area of primary forest worldwide has decreased by over 80 million hectares since 1990. More than 100 million hectares of forest are adversely affected by forest fires, pests, diseases, invasive species, drought, and adverse weather events. The COVID-19 crisis has thrown into sharp focus the importance of conserving and sustainably using nature, recognizing that people's health is linked to ecosystems' health.
The global pandemic brought to the fore many things, and although it is seen as a significant disaster, both in terms of loss of lives, poor health, and the declining economies, it also brought out the need for people all over the world to appreciate nature and family. So while the pandemic is described by many as an existential threat, I would also like to highlight that climate change was described as an existential threat long before the pandemic and will continue to be on the front burner. And we should not, therefore, forget the importance of the need to protect our environment, our plants, our animals, as we develop our different countries to different levels.
And in tapping into this, the Nigerian government on its part recently approved a new national forest policy to safeguard the nation's ecosystem. The new forest policy was a revised version of the one approved in 2006, which lacked the rationality to protect the nation's environment and create jobs. This comes as the country's forest area has been on a continuous decline since 1970, having dropped from 10% to 6% recently.
Nigeria, unfortunately, to this point, we are ranked number 34 in terms of biodiversity. Partly because our forest cover is far below the world minimum. Instead of the 25% world minimum or standard, you can go beyond, is more. We have, at this point, 6%. And this 6% even increased just from the last, I believe, 5 years of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. When we came in, it was 4%. So something is happening, and the NCF is right there. With the creation of additional conservation areas, you'll be sure to increase the forest cover as well as the biodiversity level, so that we can be part of what the world is doing.
The Nigerian Conservation Foundation says it is certain that Green Recovery Nigeria is a grand project to remedy the situation. The overall goal of this project is to firmly establish a forest rehabilitation scheme in 25% of Nigeria's total land mass from 2017 to 2047, while simultaneously promoting actions to curb deforestation and forest degradation.
There are forests being ravaged, even as we speak today, in Taraba State, in Cross River State, that need to be protected so as they can be preserved for future generations. So the NCF, through our Green Recovery Nigeria project, seeks to plant over 100 million trees over the next 30 years in order to regenerate our forests within Nigeria to get our forest cover up to the recommended FAO level of 25%.
From 2002 to 2019, Nigeria lost 126 kilo-hectares of humid primary forest, making up 14% of its total tree cover loss in the same time period. The total area of humid primary forest in Nigeria decreased by 93% in this time period. In 2010, Nigeria had 10.9 million hectares of natural forest, extending over 12% of its land area. In 2019, it lost 86.7 kilo-hectares of natural forest, which is equivalent to 19.6 million hectares of carbon dioxide emissions. Meanwhile, the federal government says the national target of increasing the nation's total forest cover from 10% to 25% and the need to use the forest as a veritable carbon sink to address climate change make it necessary to review the 2006 National Forest Policy to a new policy that is all-inclusive and in line with current global standard.
Last year, when the president made commitment of 25 million, we thought it would just be one time thing of planting 25 million and we rested. But he pushed us and modified that directive that it becomes an annual event now. And instead of 25 million, he coined it to say 25 million minimum that we must plant every year. We've never been pushed in our life as forester like the last year that we have to raise 27 million tree seedlings in the country as against 25. And as I speak to you, we have planted almost 70% of what we raise in the country. Now, we started with 10 indigenous species, 2 that you could call exotic among them, probably Tectona grandis and Melina. Remember, they all brought to this country about 40, 50 years ago. So they're already adapting to Nigerian soil and are not the same form as were brought in from Brazil and Malaysia about that period. So strictly now, the mandate we have is to work on indigenous tree species, those that are fruiting, that we should shorten the age from 25, 30 years to maximum 7 years, and those that are economic or hardwood, for green what we raise for them are shelter bed species that are strong enough to stand the wind. At the same time, the shrubs are the candidate species like the 4 provenances of Jatropha cactus that will help us regenerate all the degraded lands, particularly up north and other such species. So majorly 95% of what we are raising are indigenous species.
Uganda has been a shining light in having a sustainable forest policy. For decades, farmers hungry for land and families needing firewood whittled away at Uganda's forests, home to endangered gorillas, elephants, and chimpanzees. Now the decline has not only stopped, but reversed, thanks to a policy encouraging private tree plantations as buffers next to protected forests.
We know that we have one of the best mahoganies in the world, in the forests that we have around here. There has been a recent wave on Afzelia africana, which was being extracted from the northern and the northern part of the country, and then the Tectona grandis. Yeah, they are very highly prized species that are very much demanded out of this country. But efforts are being put in place to ensure that they are very much protected and guarded so that they are not extinct.
Between 1990 and 2015, Uganda's forest cover plummeted from 24% of its area to 9%. and according to the country's National Forestry Authority, is now up to 12.5%. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, which helps fund some of the private forestry investors, says Uganda's forest cover has clearly increased. Companies are licensed in the country to plant trees for timber in unplanted parts of government-owned forest reserves.
Several incentives were thought about, including putting aside land in central forest reserves for afforestation, and also making available free seedlings to communities and every individual in the country to be able to plant.
One of the tropical forest reserves, Mpanga Forest Reserve in central Uganda, that had lost an expansive patch for farming, is now fast regenerating as commercial plantations reduce pressure on it from illegal loggers. A lone cabin raised on concrete bunkers sits by a dark, narrow trail that slatters through the forest's dense undergrowth and tall hardwood trees that can reach up to 40 meters. Visitors who walk through the trail can espy red-tailed monkeys hopping in tree branches and squirrels streaking in the underbrush. The program first began 15 years ago, but the impact unfolded slowly because it had to mop up growing demand before any recovery. Timber consumption rose by around 50% between 2005 and 2011, fueled by growing demand for firewood and housing materials. So far, the National Forestry Authority has licensed 4,000 private investors, including Britain's New Forest Company and Germany's Global Woods. Nearly half of 200,000 hectares allocated for the initiative have been planted. Favored species include pine, eucalyptus, teak, and mesopsis. Forestry investors make a return on investment of over 500% over 20 years for a plantation of pine trees. It takes at least 7 years for a seedling to grow tall enough to count as forest cover. Their timber soaks up demand previously met by illegal logging. Patrols by armed guards also help deter illegal logging.
We've gone an extra mile to engage communities whom we call stakeholders that are living adjacent to these forest reserves and organize them into what we call collaborative forest management groups and are participating in the management of these forests. They are deriving benefits in a much more sustainable way and in an organized way.
Uganda's tropical rainforests are vast carbon sinks, safeguarding water catchment areas and mitigating the harsh effect of climate change. The country's maximum average annual temperature increased an estimated 0.6 to 0.9 degrees Celsius between 1951 and 2010, a 2018 Irish Aid report found, predicting an increase of around 2 degrees Celsius over the next 50 years. 59-year-old father of 12, Mohammed Katuraga, who ekes a living cultivating vanilla, beans and potatoes on the edge of Mpanga Forest, gripes that weather patterns have become erratic, with rains and drought becoming unpredictable and extreme. Mohammed's biggest obstacle is costly power. Uganda has some of the most expensive electricity in Africa.
If only the price of electricity would be reduced so we can afford to cook with it at home. For now, we do not use it much because it's expensive. Unless electricity is made affordable for us, forests will remain our source of energy for cooking. We don't have an alternative.
Reforestation might help reduce such unpredictability and slow the warming. The National Rainforest Authority says it wants to replenish forest cover back to 24% of Uganda's landmass by 2040.
We are still a rain-fed agricultural economy. So if you don't have health forests that can help you form the needed rain to support agriculture, then you will have to invest heavily into the irrigation, which still would as well suffer. The other factor is that focusing on rehabilitating these forests would still support the energy sector. These forests are catchments for all these rivers and lakes, and that's where we are generating power from these rivers. So It is a very critical resource that must be focused on critically and therefore supported so that other dependent sectors can also flourish.
A forestry assessment launched by the Food and Agriculture Organization is an innovative and easy-to-use digital format, the most comprehensive forestry assessment to date. The Global Forest Resources Assessment Report is available for public viewing, and its first ever online interactive dissemination platform contains detailed regional and global analysis for 236 countries and territories.
Of course, a report like this has a number of new findings, but let me highlight 3 of them. First of all, the forest area loss and the deforestation are slowing down, which is a great news. But we are still losing 4.7 million hectares per forest. Most of that loss happens in sub-Saharan Africa and in South America, but also in Southeastern Asia we still lose about 1 million hectares of forest every year. The second is that the area of forest found within legally established protected areas is increasing. And in fact, it has now reached 18%. This is good news because that means that the Aichi Biodiversity Target 11 of protecting 17% of terrestrial ecosystems has been met for forests. And finally, the area of forest under sustainable management plans is increasing.
More than half, that is, about 54% of the world's forests are in only 5 countries. The Russian Federation, with 815 million hectares, has 20%. Brazil hosts 12%, Canada 9%. The United States of America has 8% with 310 million hectares, and China owns 220 million hectares. The rest of the world share the remaining 46% of the forests.
The Global Forest Resources Assessment is the most comprehensive assessment of forest resources, their management and uses that exists. It's actually the only one that covers more than 60 different variables altogether. So the Global Forest Resources Assessment is the reference against which all the other forest resource information is being compared, and it is the reference also that is being used to support many international processes, and as, for example, the Rio Conventions, the Convention on Biological Diversity, Convention on Climate Change, and so on and so forth.
The key findings of the assessment indicate that the world has a total forest area of 4.06 billion hectares, which is about 31% of the total land area. Europe, including Russian Federation, accounts for 25% of the world's forest area, followed by South America with 21%, North and Central America 19%, Africa 16%, Asia has 15%, and Oceania with 5%.
The Global Forest Resource Assessment is the only comprehensive global analysis on the condition, management, and use of forest resources. It helps to track progress on a number of international commitments, including the Sustainable Development Goals. Forest, covering about a third of the Earth's land surface, is an important link between people and planet. The health of our forests are connected to the health of our air, our water, our food, our future. Today we know that as sustainable management grows, deforestation decreases. My message to you today: let's use what we know to ensure action that leads to long-term sustainable management of our world's forests.
The global forest area continues to decrease, and the world has lost 178 million hectares. Since 1990, an estimated 420 million hectares of forest has been lost worldwide through deforestation and conversion of forests to other land use, such as agriculture.
The rate of deforestation has declined substantially and is now down to 10 million hectares per year from the 16 million hectares per year in the 1990s. However, in this case too, the rate of decline is decelerating. So while it is good to see both net forest area loss and deforestation slowing, we need to worry that the pace of that decline is easing off. Urgent action is needed to strengthen the positive trends of reduced forest loss and deforestation in order to meet the objective of halting deforestation under Sustainable Development Goal 15, life on land.
Over 80% of the world's terrestrial biodiversity can be found in forests, from pine trees in the boreal north to the rainforests in the tropics. The degradation and loss of forests threaten the survival of many species and reduce the ability of forests to provide essential services such as clean air and water, healthy soils for agriculture and climate regulation, as well as protect the transmission of diseases from animals to humans.
It's a multifaceted issue. The government has its blame, the society in general, we all have our blames because everybody, we are not looking at the bigger picture. Even by the time you try to tell people, encourage them to do what is right, they now say, now you sabi pass. And that kind of statement, you know, that kind of statement, oh, is that what we will chop? And things like that. So all those nonchalant attitude usually makes us to suffer. So it's an all-encompassing issues. We have economic issues, we have social issues, sometimes even religious issues, I know conflict issues, I know and all of this is further complicated by climate change, which is real. And a lot of people are denying it, but it's real. Because by the time you talk about climate change, there are a lot of things that are changing. Rainfall patterns are changing, and the duration, the timing is changing. So a lot of things are being affected. And when that changes, there will be forced migration. And when there's forced migration, because you are not going to a vacuum, you are going to where someone or some group of people are already occupying. And when there's that resource sharing, which usually the dialogue is not very much, it just happens, and before you know it, there's conflict. So by the time we see the interconnectivity of all of this, it helps us to be able to realize the problem, and then we'll be able to tackle it from all dimensions.
Small population of people living at low densities by means of traditional patterns of agriculture, pastorals and hunting gathering have for many centuries been able to use natural resources sustainably, simply by not removing these resources faster than their reproductive or replenishment rates. However, Nigeria's large population is characterized by high percentages of illiteracy, unemployment and poverty, which act as powerful drivers of increasingly severe demands on the remaining biodiversity in the country.
The issue of climate change, ladies and gentlemen, if left unaddressed, will make corona pandemic look like child play. Corona will kill just the people. Climate change will kill everything, everything. The people, the property, the land, the trees, you name it, is gonna go. I was reading a big chunk of ice in Greenland broke away. And what happened? That ice will increase whatever micromillimeter it is of the ocean level. And that can push the rivers, riverine areas. This is how flood also incidences is being increased, apart from our own undoing within for not providing the proper drainages or clogging the drainages, building in floodplains or building in wetlands, all kinds of things. These are all the kind of things that are causing issues. So climate change is more serious and can be more devastating. This is our responsibility. Everybody, we all have responsibility, including you all here, to make sure that we do our own bit and have a safe environment for ourselves, and most importantly, for the future generation. And that is all about sustainable development that we are talking about.
That's our program for the week. Thank you for your time. We hope to be back with you next week. From me, Ayola Kasim, and the EDFA crew here in Lagos. It's bye for now.